open to the public, there is exempt information relating to the decision that has been called in to us. I recommend that the committee continues in public session until such time that exempt matters are required to be discussed. But I propose that we resolve now that the press and public may be excluded from part or all of the meeting in order to discuss sensitive information in relation to the remaining items on the agenda, on the grounds that they contain exempt information under paragraphs 3 and 5 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended, and that it would be not in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. At that time, and on the advice of officers, I would ask the committee to resolve to exclude the public and press. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you. Members all agreed? Thank you. Thank you, members. We now move on to the substantive items for today's meeting. The report can be found at page 3 of the supplementary agenda pack. The committee have been asked to consider whether we should accept a call-in of the executive decision. The procedure for this meeting and speaking scheme is set out in the Scrutiny Committee Procedure Rules, Part 4, Section 8 of the Constitution. I would like to remind those in attendance that this is the procedure that will be followed. Although we allowed speaking time for each section of registered speakers is 5 minutes shared, I'm exercising my discretion under paragraph 9.24 of the procedure rules to extend the speaking times as follows, given the exceptional circumstances of this case. Members who requested the call-in have 20 minutes shared. Members of the public supporting the call-in, 20 minutes shared. Councillor Asim Mahmood, speaking in opposition to the call-in, 10 minutes. The committee is asked to remember that we can only discuss the reasons for the call-in listed on the call-in form and the information relating to the decision made. Can I ask Councillors Antunes, Anne Shahid and Asif Shahid to come forward and speak in support of your call-in request? Councillors, it is your intention to talk about the if it's your intention to talk about restricted documents. If so, we may need to go into exempt session.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, today for hearing our position. The three of us called this decision in, and we're here today to highlight concerns which we feel are material and warranted that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee should properly take back to Cabinet. I will then highlight recommendations associated with those concerns, which we also feel you should take back to Cabinet. Those are the two principles that I understand why this committee is here today, to hear the points. We have been able to read the 30-page Cabinet report and all the supporting evidence. I have also spent much time with the community, going through all of the documentation they have. They have kindly showed me all the information that they possibly can, and I have challenged each and every one of those points. I have asked for clarification from council members, but at this moment in time, much of what I've asked for hasn't been provided, but I do understand the terms under which that has not been provided. We have a community here which was established for over 50 years. They originated under Idi Amin's Ugandan requirement that all Hindus leave the country in 1972. That is the foundation of this community from that date. That is at least 3 generations that we are looking at who have been based and operate both a consecrated temple and, both operated a consecrated temple and community centre. I would ask, is the value of that facility value of that facility is paramount in terms of social value. We will come on to the details of that in a moment. The concern I have is the current evaluation allows for only 3 years social value when we have a track record of 40 years. Most commercial property is let on a 25-year basis. I see no reason why a 25-year basis for social value should not be applied. We also have a growing community of at least 10% per annum and a catchment of 13 to 18,000. I would recommend on those concerns that the property value over 25 years, the social value is worth at least 4.2 million, if not substantially more, which is far in excess of what has been recorded in the forms. I see no justification for a 3-year value to be included in the current assessment. What we recommend is that be adjusted. The second concern is that in the assessment, only 20% of the weighting was applied to this community and facility, when all of the buildings and all the facilities are community orientated. I have worked in this professional field for 30 years, and even when we are dealing with a commercial building, 70-30 ratio, 70 cost, 30 value would be applied. The concerns are very grave in this respect. Given the 50-year history and the community use, we suggest or recommend a 50-50 weighting should have been applied to both cost or price and community value. The concern is that the council consider this property an asset when actually they have accepted it's a liability. The community currently were in negotiations and willing to take on 1.4 million in terms of structural liabilities, not including a roof which is required to be provided on the property, 160,000 in operational costs. None of these were taken into account in the evaluation. Our recommendation is that the community take the recommendation back to Cabinet as these be taken into account when looking at the value that is mitigating the liability to the council in actual cost. There is no evidence of any community engagement survey, whether regionally, locally, or even within the vicinity of the community. There is evidence in the report of consultation within the departments within the council. We do not feel that is adequate. A recommendation is that a full regional, local community engagement be undertaken to assess the impact and risks and mitigations associated with that. One of the key concerns here is that in Peterborough, within a 35-mile radius of this facility, there are circa 390 churches, circa 25 to 30 mosques or Muslim community centres. There is only one Hindu consecrated temple and community centre. Not once has that been identified within the evaluation, and that centre has been in operation for 50 years. The recommendation is that clearly that value needs to be reflected in any assessment, and the recommendation is, and we will come to it later, that they should stay and manage that facility. The property board suggested that that the best and final offer must be the route to take under section 123. That is untrue. A negotiated proposal or route is entirely feasible under section 123, particularly when community value is at stake. The community have been negotiating since 2011, had heads of terms agreed and ready to go to Cabinet in June, July and August, waiting for that approval, given assurances that that would be approved, their negotiated bid would be approved. It wasn't. It was then rescinded and an open market best offer provided. That is unacceptable. The negotiated process should have been followed. When that process was made, the community were given 1 month, September to October, to put a bid together from a standing start Even Idi Amin allowed 90 days for them to leave a country. We recommend that Section 123 be honoured, that the negotiated process be facilitated, and indeed, under Section 123, a 6-month moratorium should be provided, and it is in black and white within the legislation, for the bidder to assemble their bid properly, to manage a proposal to the council which is only right and proper. I would ask the community here, if you were resident for 50 years in one site, which your community had brought up 3 generations, you were in negotiations since 2011, then you were given 1 month to put a bid in. Would you be able to do that? Would you be able to find 1.4 million? Would you be able to put the strategy together? I don't think so. To conclude, I became a councillor to uphold the Nolan principles. I feel this administration is seeking to bankroll this very valuable community facility without fully taking this into account as quickly as it possibly can. I think that's unacceptable. Does this administration know the price of everything and the value of nothing? I leave that with you. Thank you, councillors.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Antunes has said. I'm not going to repeat everything that he said. There's quite a lot of information there. I think I'd really like to focus on the social value and the social side of this decision, which Councillor Antunes has touched on. As he said, Barratt and Dusamaj are current tenants at the New England complex with a community of over 13,500 members, and therefore have a huge social impact. Indeed, they've been tenants and serving the Hindu community for over 40 years, and as well as serving the Hindu community the Hindu community centre is a hub for dozens of cultural, sporting, educational and wellbeing activities which benefit residents and visitors in the wider community, whether of the Hindu faith or not. I'm concerned whether enough value has been placed on this social value. As I understand it, before the decision was made to dispose of the council's interest in the New England complex, there had been ongoing negotiations with Barratt and Dusamaj regarding them purchasing the property or parts of the property. It appeared that from 2017 onwards, a number of terms were proposed to Barratt and Dusamaj by the council. Now, it could be argued when we're looking at decision making and we look at fairness, have the council acted fairly in leading Barratt and Dusamaj to believe that purchasing the property or parts of the property were an option? Rules say that decision makers will follow procedures correctly and fairly. I question whether it's morally and ethically fair, as the Hindu community would appear to have been misled into believing that current tenant status would be taken into account alongside social value. Is this decision in the interests of the public? Also, as regards the decision-making process, it does say that we'll consider the views of the public, and as Councillor Antunes has said, I've not seen evidence that this has happened. I'd consider this to be very important, considering the social reach and impact of Barratt Hindu, as already stated. I'd like the committee to consider whether or not this negotiation process should be reopened. Decisions can be changed. We have seen that happen before when it is in the public interest to do so. So I'd recommend at the very least it go back to Cabinet, or indeed even to full council, to consider this, because I do think that this is a very, very important decision and the social value cannot be underestimated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My councillor calling colleagues have covered much of what I was going to say. I'm not questioning the legalities of the decision. I'm talking as a man in the street and what I consider to be an injustice with the decision, really. Barratt Hindu Samaj has been tenants of New England Complex for some 40 years, and over that period various discussions have taken place about purchasing the site. Indeed, following recent conversations with members of the Barratt Hindu Samaj Committee, they've been compliant with all requests of PCC as they were keen, almost desperate, to get this over the line. Purchase the site and go about carrying out all of the necessary works to renovate the site and bring it up to date. I've seen numerous emails dating back to 2017 where a purchase price has been agreed. I do understand PCC has to get the best deal for the council and bidders' B offer is higher. But for me, the best deal isn't just about pounds, shillings and pence. It's the added value to the community, which numbers around 13,500 individuals. The Equality Impact Assessment has given a very conservative estimate as to what this value is. This then impacts PCC, as some of the services offered prevents intervention from PCC, therefore saving the council money. And assuming I've not interpreted the figures incorrectly, once the Equality Impact Assessment has been taken into account, there's a difference of around 200k between the two bids. I'm happy to be corrected if I've miscalculated this. Another thing I would like clarifying is that when the decision was made back in December to accept Bidder B's offer, conversations were had regarding the value of the assets, and the council officer stated that the value is what someone's prepared to pay for it. Last week, Councillor Jamil was quoted in the local press as stating the asset was valued at 1.2 million. Just some clarification, please, as to which one of those is correct. As I said, I'm coming from this purely as a layman's perspective and following conversations with the Barratt Hindu Samaj Committee, when they've been led to believe for a number of years that they'd get first refusal on purchasing the asset, and this has literally been ripped from under their feet. This feels morally and ethically wrong. Also, I believe that once today's meetings take place, it can be recommended to go back to Cabinet to review their decision and can't be referred back to full council. I believe this was the same case with Warrington Fields, and that did eventually come back to full council. With this having set a precedent, I'd like to see this decision regarding New England Complex brought back to full council so that myself and my colleagues can have an input in the decision. Otherwise, it's just going back to the original decision makers to review. Thank you.
Thank you, all three, for that support for your call-in, and I hope everyone's had a chance to listen to that. I'd now like to invite questions to the councillors from the committee members. Thank you. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you. Thank you for your address. In your address, you spoke about the 3-year social value, which you say that you disagree with, and the appropriate value should have been 25 years. Can you just elaborate on that, the reasoning for that?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes. I've spent 30 years in the property profession. I've managed major procurements. In each and every case, a value would be placed either in over 25 years or what is termed in perpetuity, forever. The council suggests at the moment that the only term that they would look to value is over 3 years because they can't forecast any further forward. We have a community who have been in position for at least 40 years, who have operated that, who are not going anywhere. They are going to manage that community in perpetuity. I think at the very least it should be valued on a 25-year basis. What we have done in that figure I put forward is based on the council's annual valuation to arrive at a 4.2 million value. Actually, when I have sat down with the community and looked through the analysis, and it is substantial and it is built up in very great detail, I think that is woefully underestimated. I think you could easily double that and the value would be over 10 million in social value.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. In your address, you also say that the negotiating proposal accepted under Section 123. What I've read, it says Section 123 does not oblige the council to follow a particular process to secure an outcome of best consideration. The legislation supports an approach of going to market with a competitive bidding process in order to demonstrate best consideration as reasonably being obtained. I would like to have your comment on that.
I will do my best on the basis that I'm not a property solicitor. However, I have taken time to read Section 123 in detail. The negotiated process is viable, particularly given where a community value or community imperative is at the fore. The council is entirely able to enter negotiated basis. What they should have done is provide a red book valuation upon which to gauge what that site is worth in the open market. What is a fair and reasonable value? That is then negotiated with the incumbent community organisation, and they are allowed 6 months, which is fair and reasonable, to put a bid together to satisfy that with the council. The decision that the council have made that to best and final offer to open tender, in my humble opinion, is completely unwarranted and indeed probably unlawful. They were in a position of being negotiated, the heads of terms had been agreed, a sum had been agreed, and it was confirmed that that would be taken to the June cabinet. It was not done so. It was said it was taken to the July cabinet. It wasn't. And this was for cabinet approval. It was going to be taken to the August cabinet. It wasn't. Only following that was a council decision to move to an open tender, allowing the bidder a month to assemble a bid, a lay bidder to assemble a bid of this nature. And I won't go into the detail because I think the community will give you the detail, but even the guidance on that came out 2 weeks later. So I don't think the community were afforded full and reasonable position by the council to pursue that negotiated position. They're incumbent occupiers. They know that site well. They were taking on the liabilities. They were very clear on the liabilities that they were taking on. They had the figure agreed with the council. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Thanks. Councillor Hillier?
Again, for Councillor Antunes, is that working? Sorry. So you said that you thought, given that it was a community building, that the rating should be, instead of being 70-30, should be 50-50. Is there the capacity within the rules to do that? Is there discretion that allows that to be done? Or is the rating fixed at having to be 70-30? Do you know?
The simple answer to you is yes, indeed. It's a discretionary weighting that can be applied. And again, I go back to the basis that this site is entirely 100% occupied by community organisations and has done for the life of the site. I think there was a school there previously. As I say, I started my career as a surveyor. I did a postgraduate in property development. I've managed major procurements up to the value of 700 million. I know how to manage these type of projects. I know the weightings to apply, and in most commercial instances it's a 70-30, and that is when you're dealing with an office building or a development. This, not a community facility. Even there the community value is higher. So how the council can arrive at a 20% weighting for a community asset, which has been an investment, an asset to the community for 50 years, I struggle. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howard?
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I realise this question is probably more relevant to officers or the Cabinet member, but can you give from your perspective any background as to why this Cabinet paper kept being postponed and then disappeared? Is there any reasoning for that happening that you have a knowledge of? I think we'd put that to officers as well, but from your perspective. Thank you.
Forgive me, Councillor Howard, I have 40% hearing loss. Could I ask you please to repeat the question? I do apologise.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Antunes. So the question is, from your understanding of the Cabinet papers being postponed or cancelled a number of times, what is your understanding of the reasoning of why that happened? And I think that question we will also put to officers and the cabinet member, but from your perspective.
I've no, literally, I have no reasons to why that was the case. I don't know why that was the case, to be honest with you. I think my colleagues are the same.
Councillor Howard, I've spent many hours with the community. The view, and I'm sure they will echo this, is there was a vacuum of communication during that period. Sadly, the documentation that I have read, the cabinet report, the 30-page cabinet report, suggests that it was the community that didn't respond. The community had agreed heads of terms, which were crystallised, a price, which the council had suggested. They were taking on all the liabilities, which were identified in detail. That's the structural, the roof, the operating costs, everything. They were all there. There were no questions, really. And it was simply that they were going to take it to cabinet. And that's where the community is extremely frustrated. Their faith in the council, I can assure you, the faith in the council waned significantly during that period. And if I may, the point I wanted to make here, and I apologise for being forthright in my presentation, you as the overview and scrutiny, it is only your gift to take recommendations or concerns and recommendations back. What has been imparted in us is the community's faith over a decade of negotiation. They now have placed their faith in us to bring it to you. They then place their faith in all of you to take it forward to Cabinet or to full council.
Can I just add something to that? All I really want to say, because I think Councillor Antunes and Councillor Asif Shahid have already said that, is that if you as a community have been led to believe that, you know, there's been an offer, there's been terms put towards you, so you are led to believe that you are going to be able to purchase a property, why would you kind of question that? Why would you do anything else?
Thank you. Can I just bring Graham in 1 second? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Members, just a couple of points I wanted to clarify. One, I've heard that this request from the calling members that this should be sent to full council. This is a cabinet decision. If it is the view of scrutiny that the decision needs to be revisited, I wanted to clarify it goes back to cabinet. It's not a matter for full council. And secondly, I think it's important to recognise that we're here today to look at the validity of the governance and the process around the decision that was made. We're not here to advocate on behalf of particular parties or communities. We're here to look at how robust the process is around the decision that was reached by Cabinet. We're also not here to examine the history of the matter in depth, going back a number of years. We're here to look at the process that was followed now, this process, and how safe that process was. So I just want to bring members back to making sure that we're discussing matters that are relevant for the remit of this committee and why we're here.
Graham,
Thank you.
just a quick one, Graham. In my presentation, I did say about Warrington Fields. Wasn't it the same case with Warrington Fields, where that was cabinet decision that was then referred back to full council? Thank you.
I'm going to limit this. We're here today to discuss this particular complex. If there's questions around the governance surrounding other matters that the council is dealing with, there's a forum for dealing with that, and that isn't today. What I can say to members is that this was a cabinet decision. It's being scrutinised by the committee, and if it is to be looked at further, it is a matter for cabinet. It is not a matter for full council.
Okay, thank you. Was it scrutinised by committee, this committee, the decision?
Sorry, I'm saying it's scrutinised by the committee.
Sorry, I thought you meant previously, sorry.
Councillor Antunes.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a very short response, yes, I do agree that it's to look at the process. I feel that, as I've said, Section 123 does allow a negotiated process. There should have been an option study and risk management process undertaken by the council to determine the best route possible. That is process. The best process, as far as I am aware, or I can see, is the negotiated process, using the Red Book valuation.
Sorry,
and to pursue that. That's an option. So I am challenging that.
just to remind you, this is questions to you. You've got nothing. You can't just add more points on behalf of that. Thank you. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you again. In your address, you said that you've had a lot of discussions with the community, and this is a matter that's been ongoing since 2011 till 2025 when the decision was made. And you've mentioned about the head of terms, but my question to you is that did you see any documents or anything like that where there's sort of like a legal agreement between the council and the community? And if there wasn't no legal agreement, why?
The short answer to that, I did see the heads of terms. I've seen emails from responsible officers confirming that that offer would be taken to Cabinet for approval. Not for consideration, for approval. It didn't come forward in June.
I'm just going to interrupt again, Councillor Antunes. I'm very sorry to cut in.
No, I have seen documentation to that effect.
Councillor Antunes, we're here to discuss the decision that went to Cabinet and the paper that was sent to Cabinet and the items on your call-in request. This is not to discuss decisions that were not taken or matters that were not taken to Cabinet. Now, there is a process that's set out in the exempt annex of the Cabinet report. That matter can be discussed by members here and by officers, and questions can be asked at a later stage, but that's not something that can happen in the public space. That would need to be in a closed session. But for the purposes of this scrutiny committee, it's to look at the decision that was taken by Cabinet and not papers or matters that were not sent to Cabinet.
If I may respond to that, I'm not referring to the Cabinet papers. This is material that I saw while on site, email exchanges, copies of files that I saw with the community, nothing to do with the Cabinet report. I'm making no reference to the Cabinet report. And indeed, on that point, I made an extensive list of documents which I asked for the Council to provide me, and I received none of them. I wanted those to be able to validate what I saw within the community, who were open and trusting and put their faith in me. And I find it disappointing that the Council cannot trust me to look at those documents that I asked for. And I'm a professional, and I know what documents should be there. And I wanted to see how robust that process was, so I could independently make that assessment. Sadly, the Council denied me that. But a community who I've only really known over the last few months had such faith and trust in me that they opened every single document to me and every question I asked to them, and they proved and substantiated everything that I challenged them on. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Oh wait, sorry. We can't have that now. Thank you. Are there any further questions for the councillors who brought this call in? I'll take that as a no. Thank you all for bringing this, and thank you for answering the questions. Can I now ask Mr. Bathia to come forward and speak in support of the call-in? Mr. Bathia will also be speaking for Mr. Vyas, who was unable to attend today. Thank you.
Chair, members of the panel, thank you for allowing me to address you today. Thank you also to all three calling council members who have done a really, really good job of supporting us and making the submissions to you this morning. You should have received by email some detailed written representations on behalf of BHS. I hope you've had a chance to consider those. I'm not going to address you on detail of any of those this morning. There are matters which I will address. Some of them arise from the report before you from the head of estates prepared for this meeting that raises a number of issues that have been considered already by the calling councillors, but would also like to make some representations on behalf of BHS in relation to those. I appreciate we're not here to look at the history since 2011 or whenever it was, as Mr. Kitchen has just made that point. However, there is a history which is relevant, but I'm going to take you not to 2011, but to the meeting of 8th August 2024. This meeting really set the scene for the change from a negotiated position to what was then a competitive bid process. This was the trigger for it. This changed the very, very long-standing relationship with the council to a very, very different footing. In that meeting, the current head of estates disclosed that after all that time, the council had received an unsolicited bid for the property of £1.2 million from a commercial developer. I leave it to you to consider whether disclosure of that was appropriate. We consider that to be quite serious. We then question the procedure that ensued following that. Secondly, this was the same individual who then oversaw the bidding exercise in autumn of 2025. There was then a repetition of that same breach in January 2025 when we were advised the commercial developer had increased their bid to £1.3 million, and that is the benchmark that we were now to meet. Section 3.7 of the report that I referred to says there was consultation since 2011 with the community. With respect, that is simply incorrect. There were negotiations, not consultations. Those negotiations yielded nothing for either party over that period. To insinuate that BHS had ample opportunity to complete a deal is quite frankly disingenuous. PCC cannot point to a single head of terms that were approved for the community to sign and enter into a legal process at any time. Crucially, there's no consultation whatsoever before or after the decision to proceed to best bids, despite the very, very real and foreseeable risk of displacement of this community from this site after 40 years of occupation. On the 6th of April 2025, BHS made the very offer the council invited of £1.3 million. Councillor Antunes has referred to this and then referred to the vacuum of communication from that point. This offer was supposed to go to Cabinet in June. It did not. In July, it did not. In August 2025, the Cabinet meeting was cancelled, I believe. That offer was not only put to Cabinet, it was never acknowledged. Despite numerous chases by BHS on the offer that the council had invited it to make following receipt of a commercial bid, not responded to, not acknowledged, not accepted, not rejected. Why? We await this explanation as to why that was. We then enter into this, frankly, rushed bid process announced on the 12th of September, completely out of the blue, given all that had preceded before that. Not only that, the deadline of just 4 weeks. A lot of the bid documentation was not provided until the 24th of September, some 12 days later, some not even later than that, and some not at all. The council knew they were dealing with a small charity community religious organisation with internal governance procedures, and yet were pressurised to submit a bid within a 4-week period. Any assessment, any consultation, any discussion, particularly given the history of contact with the community over 14 years, they should have known. This was slap bang in the middle of one of our busiest religious festivals, Navratri, 10 nights, 10 days. Volunteer time, executive committee time, all devoted to making that event a success. How can this possibly place us on a fair footing? Paragraph 3.15 goes on to a statement that processes were changed to ensure that previous government arrangements, to ensure government arrangements that had earlier proposals did not follow were changed. What exactly were those failures? We've never been told what those were. Please consider this aspect carefully. The same personnel were involved in those governance procedures since 2011, in which case this begs the question, who was responsible for those alleged failures? Even if they did exist historically, why is the community penalised for them now? We had a meeting with the leader of the council and other members of other officers on the 3rd of October 2025. The leader promised transparency, good governance that had been previously lacking. As you will gather from my representations, we do not agree these have been delivered to the community. Councillor Antunes has already alluded to the Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 and the duty to obtain best consideration. If that was the ultimate aim for the council, why not put the bid open to commercial process? Why was it only limited to the community? If the ultimate aim for the council is to reduce its debt, then why put us through this process at all, knowing that we couldn't possibly compete? However, as Councillor Antunes has already explained, there is discretion within that process under the General Disposal Consent Order, England 2003. Further, what plans were made in the event, the very real risk that the community would be displaced? 3.28 of that report gives the community no comfort that any consideration was given, that any mitigation was accounted for. This should have been done before the bid process was even considered, but it's never been done. There is no plan B, there is no commitment from the council on this, there is no strategy on this. If there are no suitable alternative premises, where does this leave the community? It leaves it in a very precarious and worrying position. I go one step further. Who decided the risk of community detention in this scenario was low? If there is no mitigation, the governance is poor. Simple as that. Who else was consulted? The police? The Commission for Racial Equality? Any other external organisations? No, not that we know of. Can I submit, and this is quite a bold statement, no other community would be treated in this manner. No other community would tolerate the indignity that PCC has subjected the Hindu community to in this process. There's been a position pervasive in discussions and comments and the cabinet decision that because the community has sitting tenancy rights, there's nothing to worry about. That is not the case. Where we are, the likely outcome is that one faith group is now going to become the custodian of another. In practical terms, one faith group becomes the landlord and the other becomes the tenant. At some stage, the landlord may decide to exercise their legal rights to occupy the premises. What happens then? Has there been any consideration of this possibility? We say not. Even if that's not the case, one can foresee quite reasonably the risk of escalation of community tensions, but this has never been considered, or the impact of this has been considered to be low. Even if we were to remain in this unit as tenants under existing tenancy protection, this gives the community no scope for growth, no scope to expand the services or social value to the people of this city, to its own community and wider. This is, as Councillor Antunes has already said, a growing community and a valuable community. The reality is, once this purchase takes place to another party, the community stops becoming the council's problem. That underscores why there's been no consideration of suitable alternatives. I now turn to 3.29, referring to 4 sets of heads of terms over 14 years. That sentence in itself tells its own story. And I've said earlier, there's ample opportunity for there to be an approved set of terms that the community could have signed at any time and was willing to. We did not control that process. We did not control the timelines. We did not control the figures. Each iteration of these sets of terms became progressively better for the council and worse for the community. Yet we're willing to accept them had they been presented as a signed off and approved set that we could have proceeded to a legal process. Even when the community came up with the offer, £1.3 million on the 6th of April, going from a position of consideration of £1, by the way, which is not insignificant for a small community, for a small charity, run and donated completely by volunteers. That offer was never responded to, even when the very offer of £1.3 million, against a later valuation of £1.4 million, by the way, was made. That has never been responded to. Social value has been discussed at some length already, and in this report, it now states that social value was not to be deducted from the purchase price, but this assessment was only undertaken to support the community in applying that to any bid that it made. This is really confusing, so I think it's really important that we clarify this. There's a report prepared by Ian Phillips, and the report rightly says, the head of estates report rightly says, that was prepared long before the best and final bids process. This is February 2025. The report doesn't say that. It says, I think there's conflating 2 different processes. But the point I really want to make is that by emails of the 1st of March 2025 and the actual offer of 6th April 2025, both were quite clear that BHS's understanding, based on the discussions with the council, was that the social value element would be deducted from the purchase price. That has never been challenged because those emails have never been responded to, they've never been acknowledged. But that's being challenged now in this process. The report says communication was clear on this point. How was it clear? When was it clear? By whom was it clear? It was not clear. It was clear from the discussions that we had that to effectively, for want of a better word, reward the community for the social value that is provided over decades, and the decade, the last decade of the history of negotiations, that amount will be deducted from the purchase price, which was well within the council's rights, by the way. Apologies, I'm just going to gather my papers and find my right place. As I say before, this report conflates those two processes in respect to social value. The first was the invited offer of April 2025, for which social value was discounted, or should have been discounted. Second was the best and final bids process, where social value was treated very differently. They're not the same process, and they should have not been treated as such. This report also says that as part of the bid process, additional questions were raised of BHS and additional information was sought. When were those questions asked? By whom and to whom? We have no evidence of receipt of such. Now, given the history of this matter, given the high stakes, given the importance to the community, there is not a chance that we would not have responded if that was going to help the council consider our bid properly and make the decision that we wanted. We did not receive those questions or requests for additional information. As to paragraph 3.41 of this report, we question the justification for going to best and final bids at all, given that a near market valuation offer of £1.3 million was before the council already since the 6th of April 2025. Never considered, never acknowledged, never accepted, never rejected, never went to cabinet. But even if that decision can be justified, and that's a matter for you, it was deeply flawed. I've already raised the issue of late or no disclosure of key bid documents, but we also have really conflicting accounts in respect of this Red Book valuation. On the 3rd of October 2025, in the meeting with the leader, head of estates said no valuation had been undertaken. In an interview with the Peterborough Telegraph on the 2nd of January 2026, the deputy leader said that a Red Book valuation had been obtained of £1.4 million and shared with all bidders. Third, in the report to you by the head of estates now, suggests that a valuation was obtained, but perhaps after the bids were received. Which is it? What I can say to you is that BHS did not receive any indication or guide price on this property at any time during the bid process. Did another bidder receive this information? If so, we challenge the inherent flaws in the process, and this adds credence to our argument that there was poor governance. I now turn to the issue of the equality impact assessment. This is actually probably the most important aspect of this for the community. It's also a requirement under the Equality Act 2010.
Sorry, you've just got 30 seconds left. Thank you.
I'm very nearly finished. I think the point is that we've never seen this document. For some reasons, it's been declared as exempt. Not quite sure why. But the impact assessment for this community has been done entirely in a vacuum. Where is the consultation with the community that it impacts? Where is the engagement with the community that it impacts on such a fundamental issue for the community, given the history, given the growth, given the value?
Sorry, you've just not as time up. Thank you. I'd like to thank you very much for making that presentation, and I now invite members of the committee, if they've got any questions for Mr. Bahir. Now's your time. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you. Thank you for your address, a detailed address. What I've gathered from your presentation is that you have some concerns about the poor governance and the officer not acknowledging or replying. What steps did you take, or did you make any complaints, or did you raise it with senior officials that you were not getting any responses?
We haven't made any official complaint.
We've raised several emails chasing up the documentation.
Following,
Sorry, that's just for you, so if you can remain seated, please, thank you.
what we did was trust the relationship. We made an offer, the offer that you wanted. Here it is, please consider it, please do the right thing that you said you would do and put it before Cabinet. We chased up that offer because we know the wheels of council mechanisms are slow. We'd got to 13 years by that point. We chased and chased and chased and had no response. But to answer your question, no official complaint has been made in relation to that.
Thank you. Councillor Newman Iqbal.
Was the other party, can you hear me? Was the other party given the same time to accumulate the bid, considering that BHS was aware that the site had been on the sale listing for a long time?
That's a matter that only the council can answer.
Thank you. Councillor Hillier.
Thank you. You said you trusted the relationship. I guess what I wanted to ask was, in the period where negotiations were happening from kind of 2011 onwards to about 2014, how would you characterise the relationship with PCC, and did the community act in a way where they acted in reliance of a belief that they had that the asset might be transferred to them? So, for example, did you do any improvements? Did you do any investment in the building, or take steps to consolidate your position there?
There's several layers to that, if I may try and just break them down a little bit. The first aspect, and I speak on behalf of the community, so I can say this with confidence, that the relationships with all officers and anybody that we dealt with the council during that period was respectful, supportive, collaborative, and we don't want that to change. That relationship was never sour, it was never difficult, it was always a relationship of trust and belief and faith that these two parties would work together to achieve the right outcome for both parties and for the wider community. That's the first point. The second point, as to the reliance, yes, there was considerable reliance on those discussions that we would get to a point where we would have some security, some permanence, and the ability to take stock and grow. There was reliance on that. Now, we got as far as commissioning architect's plans, incurring solicitors' fees, deciding whether to reconfigure the units that we were considering at that point, or to demolish them and start again. We've got detailed costings on that. Those options were put before the community at AGMs and EGMs. And just going back to this point that I keep saying Professor for some reason, Councillor Antunes raised, we were also taking on the liabilities. If we'd been successful for part of the site or for all of the site, the costs of taking on those liabilities were considerable. The document that I've got in front of me now, very conservatively, purely because different parts of the complex were assessed at different points for structural repairs. Conservatively, since 2015, 3-4 different reports have been produced. That figure on this document is just close to £1.5 billion. That doesn't take into account any inflation on any of those aspects since then. So the community was prepared to take on those liabilities in addition to any other costs that would incur. Considerable reliance. At one point, sorry to elaborate on this a bit more, Councillor Hillier, at one point we were given a document with a red line to saying this is your demolition line. This is where you can demolish up to by the council. Does that answer all your questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. There's a lot of stuff at play here, and I don't think this court of law that we have here has enough time to consider all the nuances. But can I just ask if it's your understanding, or the Temple would have had an understanding, that as long-term sitting tenants, they would be offered preferential terms, or at least first refusal, should they be able to reach a red book asking price?
This is quite a critical point at all points. Certainly around these discussions around August 2024, when this commercial bidder appeared on the scene, the recollection and understanding of several members of the community that were present in meetings was that this was on a first refusal basis.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? In that case, I thank you very much for your presentation and for taking those questions. And I'd now like to invite Councillor Asim Mahmood to come forward and speak in opposition of the call-in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It wasn't my intention to speak today, but once I had learnt about the call-in and I read the reasons for the call-in, I was compelled as ward councillor for the area of where the disposal is being proposed, that I should speak. I, from the outset, want to make absolutely clear that I support the original cabinet decision. Before I go into the governance points, I do want to acknowledge the current occupiers of the site. Many have made valuable contributions to the community over a very long period of time. And I understand that this process is difficult and unsettling for some. These concerns are real and they deserve to be treated with respect. However, we must operate within the legal framework that governs how councils manage public assets. Under Section 123 of the Local Government Act, the council is required to obtain the best consideration reasonably attainable when disposing of land. This duty is not optional and cannot be set aside because of historic discussions or understandable expectations. The council must be able to demonstrate compliance with that duty, which is why a competitive process and independent valuation were necessary. From a ward perspective, I also want to correct the impression that local members were not consulted or that the community impacts were ignored. Ward councillors have been consulted at various stages of this process. We raised questions and we also considered the options that were presented to us. And we are satisfied that the disposal approved by Cabinet is appropriate and in the best interests of our ward residents. Social value is hugely important and it was formally weighted in the evaluation. Officers have confirmed that bidders were invited to provide further information on the social value proposals and only one bidder did so. I raise this not to criticize any organisation but to underline that the council must assess what is properly evidenced and submitted, not what might be hoped for in the future. Social value has to be measurable and deliverable if it is to be genuinely in the best interest of residents. I'm also concerned about the elements of the call-in that appear to suggest unlawful or unethical behaviour by officers. If anyone genuinely believes that this is the case, this is not the appropriate forum to pursue those allegations. The council has proper channels, including the monitoring officer and official complaints procedure, for dealing with such matters of legality or conduct. Scrutiny should not be used to imply wrongdoings without evidence being tested through those proper channels. I also think it is important to remind ourselves of the role of this committee. This, as Graham has previously outlined, is that this is an executive decision. Scrutiny can review the process and make recommendations, but the lawful decision maker is the Cabinet. That makes it all more important that this committee focuses on whether the decision was lawful, informed and reasonable, rather than revisiting the merits of individual bids. On that test, the Cabinet decision clearly stands up. It was considered through the Property Board, involved legal and finance, and was supported by an independent Red Book valuation, included social value and equality considerations, and followed a structured scoring process. From a governance perspective, this is a robust and defensible approach. Finally, I want to be clear that opposing this call-in does not mean dismissing the contributions or concerns of the current occupiers, but as Ward Councillor, our duty is to the whole community and to ensure that decisions are lawful, fair and sustainable in the long term. In my view, this is exactly what the Cabinet has done. For those reasons, I urge this committee not to take any further action and to allow the original Cabinet procedures to follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. If you don't mind, I'll just start with one question to you. You stated that ward councillors have been consulted and are satisfied that the decision is correct. And I think that was in response to the fact that you didn't, there was, that you believed that the community hadn't been consulted. Sorry, can I just, sorry. So what community consultation is it that you're referring to that took place? Thank you.
I am referring to the consultations undertaken with ward councillors. So we were consulted as ward councillors.
Sorry, can you just be quiet while he give him the chance to respond, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So we were consulted as ward councillors as part of the process, and we were told about what is being proposed, and given we raised a number of questions, and we were satisfied that the future of the New England complex is heading in the right direction.
Okay. Sorry, can I just remind people that if there is continued interruption, you may be asked to leave, just so everyone has a fair chance to respond. Thank you. Sorry. So did you consult with your residents, or was it just amongst your ward colleagues?
No, we did consult with residents of the ward nearby, and yeah, we were happy with the responses that we were getting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, I want to be clear that at no point were we or I as ward councillor was concerned about the process at all. It's just unfortunate the sort of, as I mentioned in my outline, is that it is a very difficult decision. But we were satisfied with the direction of travel.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hillier.
Thank you, Chair. Did you consult with the Hindu community using the building in your ward?
The short answer to that is no, because as no. Let me. I want to be absolutely clear about why that answer is no, because as sitting councillors, we have not, or BHS has never engaged with the sitting councillors to this date, and we have, as ward councillors, we get lobbied quite a lot about, community organisations in our ward, but it is quite unfortunate that they chose, for whatever reason, not to engage with us. So it's not from our perspective, not reaching out, but if they genuinely reached out to us and said to us that, look, we unfortunately that didn't happen until much later of the process of this asset disposal.
Thank you.
Can I have a follow-on question? Sorry.
Yeah, I've just got one point I just want to raise, is that unfortunately members of the public cannot ask questions, and nor can anyone sitting in the public gallery. So just to iterate that. Councillor Hillier, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So given that ward councillors are elected to represent all of their ward, and given the high tension and profile of this decision, would it not have been reasonable for you to reach out and seek engagement?
No, because we felt as so that it would be uninviting for us to approach a situation where it doesn't seem necessary for where it feels that that there is a barrier of communication. We didn't want to over exasperate those sort of concerns. So yeah, that is why. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. And I asked you this question as ward councillor, because that's what you're sitting there in the position of. What we have now is seemingly a tussle between two distinct religious groups, which is a great shame it's come to that. What we're talking about really is a property acquisition.
Sorry, Councillor Allen. Sorry, just a second, Councillor Allen. We're straying into exempt information.
I don't think so. No.
I'm
just going to ask a sensible, straightforward question about whether, in the ward councillor's view, the two organisations could coexist on the same site.
Yeah, we can't discuss that in the public
That
setting,
can't be
unfortunately. No.
Well, at least the gallery's heard it.
Thank you. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Oh, sorry, is that? I'll try again. As a ward councillor, I'm of no faith particularly, but that's not relevant in the sense that, any building in my ward that is of a faith or none, I try and get involved in, I try and understand, which I believe we should all do as good ward councillors. For the ward councillors that you're representing in your ward, and obviously you're here representing your views as the ward councillor in that area, do you have the same relationship with all the buildings in your ward, including specifically the temple that sit with members that sit behind you today? Thank you.
Yeah, we actively engage in the soup kitchens and the various charity groups that run in our ward, and the religious groups in our ward, including many of the churches, and many of them they reach out and say, look, we are conducting X or whatever, and we would like your buy-in, or we would like you to help us promote it, or do that. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case here. We felt that there was I think engagement is a two-party process, and when it is felt that the engagement is only sort of one-sided, then you can't do much in that, and it's just unfortunate that we're in that sort of avenue. But to answer your question, we do. We do a lot of activities with other religious groups in our ward without a problem. Yeah.
Can I follow up?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. So in light of what you're saying, you're suggesting that the sort of two-way communication wasn't very strong with the temple. Can you sit here and have a view on it to say that disposal is appropriate for ward residents if you're not fully engaged in that building, the community, and how they're using it? Is that appropriate to come here without having the whole wide view of the community and what's going on within it?
Yeah, it is, because the wider ward and the residents that reside within it have made their views through us, and it is why I am here today.
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
Thank you for that. In terms of the residents, if I'm heard you right, Councillor Mboob, you said that you did consult with residents close by. Is that correct?
Yes.
Sorry,
yes,
could you
right.
speak up? I couldn't hear that.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I'll just ask it again. You did say at the beginning that you had consulted with residents in the immediate locality.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Do you have any evidence of the consultation that you went through with them, and any responses that you've actually then presented as information from ward councillors to the relevant cabinet?
That
gave a reflective process that you actually had carried out in that whole area.
Yeah, it was more of an informal process, rather than formally going out there. And
Sorry, can you keep down in the public gallery? Thank you.
which consisted of us conducting rowing, street surgeries, etc., just to gauge the mood. So it wasn't a formal consultation period, but as you would expect, we did consult in that way, and we were quite satisfied with the responses that we were getting.
Yes, you can come back. Thank you.
Thanks for that. So what you're saying is that you made the decision as ward councillors from not giving factual information back to the people that were actually then going to make the decisions. You felt that with the information that you had received, that was absolutely acceptable, and hopefully a consistent approach with the residents actually that you were talking to. Is that what you're actually saying?
Yes, yeah, that is what I'm saying, yeah.
Does that answer your questions? Yeah, thank you. Can I just remind people that this is the final warning. If anyone else does interrupt, they will be asked to leave. Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Okay. Committee members, the recommendation on page 3 of the agenda. Oh, sorry. Can I ask you to take your seat?
Yep,
Sorry, thank you. Committee members, the recommendation on page 3 of the agenda pack asks us to consider the request to call in a decision taken by the Cabinet in respect of executive decision disposal of asset known as New England Complex. Does the committee feel that we have done that? Thank you, members. We will now move on to item 6, the response to the call-in. Okay. Sorry, I've just been informed that it's likely that we are going to overrun, so I believe we need to take a vote. So it's now, we've got half an hour until, until the meeting is scheduled to finish, and in accordance with the Council's standing order, this extraordinary meeting must now move to resolution without further discussion. Does anyone want to move a motion to suspend standing order 40.2 so the meeting can be extended? That's a yes from Councillor Jones. Can second it? Yeah. Thank you. All agree? Thank you. Can I please now invite Cabinet Member Councillor Mohammed Jamil, Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Governance, and supporting officers to present their response to the call-in.
Sorry, Councillor Garrity, can I ask, is it possible to have a comfort break at some point?
There will be one at 12 o'clock, yeah, as long as that's okay with everyone. Would you rather do it now? Yeah, we can do it now, yeah. Okay, 10 minutes? We'll give that 10 minutes, so if everyone can come back at 22. Thank you. Please can I invite Cabinet Member Councillor Mohammed Jamil, Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Governance, and supporting officers to present their response to the call-in.
Thank you, Chair. I hate doing this in this way, but unfortunately, due to the sensitive nature of some of the things we're going to discuss, I'm going to propose that we go into exempt session. We've discussed it earlier, so my proposal is that we go to exempt session so we can answer some of the questions that have been raised.
Excuse me, Chair. Could the speaker speak closer to his microphone? Can't hear a thing.
Certainly, Councillor Allen. I was saying, in light of the responses that we're going to be giving, some of the information is quite sensitive, and therefore I'm proposing that we go into exempt session.
Is there a seconder for that?
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
I could totally agree with that and support that. Yes.
Are we all agreed? Yes.
Just very, very briefly, is it possible to ask any questions, at least in the public realm, before we go into private? I think the nature of this scenario, some publicity is
Sorry, we've
beneficial.
got to have the presentation first before the questions. So
It's relevant to what Councillor Jamil is saying. It's not a question to anybody else.
Okay.
Do you need to repeat the question?
thank you.
So I think what the chair is saying is that before members are able to question both officers and the cabinet member or portfolio holder, they need to present their statement, and they're saying they can't present their statement or case in public session. So it's not a time for questions yet. So we need to go. They're proposing exempt session to allow the statement.
Thank you for clarifying.
Question afterwards.
Councillor Howard.
Through you, Chair, if I may suggest, I don't know if it's possible, is it possible to have a public presentation and question, and then for the more sensitive issues, could we go into an exempt session where we can obviously ask some more, so at least there is a public front in part of this part of the section, because I'm sure not everything Councillor Jamil wishes to say will be exempt. So just a suggestion.
Councillor, I would suggest that the public version of the response to the call-in is contained in the publicly available information for the meeting. It sets out, I believe, officers' direct responses to each grounds for the call-in. I obviously don't know what Councillor Jamil or other officers are about to say, but I suspect that it goes beyond that's in the public space at present.
Are we happy to move to exempt session? Okay, can I please ask all members of the press and public to leave? Thank you. I'd also just like to take this opportunity to remind mainly people that were in the exempt thing, do be mindful there was exempt material discussed that can no longer be discussed now that the public and the press are here. And I'd now like to take this opportunity to start the debate and open it to committee members. Thank you. Okay, I'll just take that opportunity.
My understanding was, wasn't the Cabinet going to make a presentation to us, or is that already been done? Or
That's been and done.
All right, so it's gone straight to debate, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, as I said, the debate is purely for committee members. So
Okay.
no one can come back with anything on that. Councillor Allen.
There doesn't seem to be much appetite for debate. So at this stage, could I suggest a recommendation, please, Chair?
Please do, thank you.
Okay, can I suggest the recommendation as follows? The Cabinet to review the process and decision and determine there will be no disposal until the tenant have found alternative premises or retained their current occupation of the centre within a timescale of 6 months.
Thank you for that, Councillor Allen. I think we take that recommendation. I think there was a couple of other things that I took from the questions previously that perhaps we'd like to add to that. Does anyone else like to put those forward? Councillor Hillier?
Yes, I think Cabinet, in order to again, should have sight of the methodology used to select the weighting, and also the information behind. We've had the conclusion to the equality impact assessment, but we've not had the actual substance of the equality impact assessment. So Cabinet have made their decision without sight of that, and I feel that that really needs to be looked at.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. I'm following on from Councillor Hiller's. Sorry.
Louder, sorry.
Sorry, Steve. I'm following on from your comment there. We also talked about other weightings, other weightings that need to have further information with it as well. All the weightings. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Please, could you clarify that? Sorry. I think there's a couple of people can't hear. Sorry.
Sorry about that. It follows on from what Councillor Hiller says about weightings, and it's also about all the other weightings that we talked about in the report.
Thank you. I was quickly... Oh, sorry, Councillor Iqbal.
I'll let you go ahead. Do you want to say something?
Sorry. I was just going to quickly say, just so that you're kind of privy to a little bit of the discussion that took place, based on the recommendations that you have heard, I think it's fair to say that certainly some members of the Scrutiny Committee feel that there was some information that was not necessarily present at the Cabinet meeting, and that perhaps further clarification around some of the weightings, some of the equality impact statement should be given to Cabinet in order to potentially aid their decision-making process. As Councillor Allen has suggested, there obviously are concerns about the current tenants, and if they were to lose that, their tenancy, we don't want people to be, in effect, homeless. He's made a suggestion of 6 months in order to work with all existing tenants, and if necessary, to help them find an alternative place if the current bidder is determined to be the one that's going to go ahead. So hopefully I've summarised that correctly. If anyone feels I've not, please do come in. And I think Councillor Iqbal's got something to say now.
Well, my view is different. My approach is different. What I'm going to say is that if you're going to considering option B of the recommendation, the test for this committee is clear. We must be satisfied that the Cabinet decision was taken in breach of the Constitution, was unlawful in process, inconsistent with policy or budget, or was unreasonable or irrational. That's the test that we, as a committee, need to consider. Even if those thresholds are met, we would then be required to clearly identify these failings and set out alternative recommendation for Cabinet to consider, which Councillor Allen has alluded to do so. Well, my view is, Stephen, having reviewed the papers and the evidence before me, I'm struggling to identify any such failings. The question that we asked officers was that they are going to provide us with clarification. The information that they've given us is already there. They are going to give us some clarification, so that doesn't alter my position that much. On the issue of constitutionality, I believe the Council has acted in accordance with the Constitution and relied on Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972. That section places statutory duty on the Council to obtain best consideration for the disposal of its assets, and there is no evidence the Cabinet has acted outside that duty. In terms of process, the decision was supported by appropriate information and officers' input throughout. That's what I read and understood from the paperwork I was given. The Section 151 officer was consulted. Again, I'm referring back to the grounds where these were raised that the Section 151 officer wasn't involved. Officers from property, communities and growth and regions were involved, and the disposal was approved by the property board. A red book evaluation was undertaken. A full equality impact assessment was completed, and an independent evaluation confirmed that the preferred offer represented fair market value and complied with the Council's duty to obtain best value. Relevant correspondence from bidder A was shared with the property board. Again, I'm taking into account whether relevant information was shared and was taken into account, and Cabinet, and the material communications were reviewed by legal and finance before the agreed route for disposal was approved. While Section 123 does not prescribe a specific process, a competitive bidding approach is a recognized and reasonable way of demonstrating best consideration, and that it is the approach that was taken. There has been reference to historical discussions going back many years, but no legal binding agreement was ever reached, and therefore there is no legal constraint on the Council's decision making. The Council has also indicated a willingness where possible to support the displaced occupier by assisting in identifying alternative accommodation, which is an important mitigating factor, which I fully support, and that should be the case. Finally, although assertions have been made, again I'm referring back to the grounds, and those are the relevant documents that we should be referring or making reference to. Assertions have been made that officers acted ultra vires. There have been no formal complaints and no evidence provided to support those claims. Chair, for those reasons, I am unable to identify any procedural, legal or constitutional failings that would justify referring the decision back to Cabinet, nor is it clear that the Cabinet could lawfully do differently given its statutory duty to obtain best value. On that basis, I do not believe the call-in meets the threshold to be upheld, and that's my view. But unless anybody else likes to contribute and convince me otherwise.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you. Break the silence. Thank you, Chair, through you. I think, with the recommendation we've made, it's to ensure we respect the fact that there has been a bidding process and an approved bidder, to not compromise their position. But equally as important, and it might not be statutory, but a moral duty, and the difference between right and wrong is to help support the temple into alternative accommodation. Now, I believe we can do both as a council without compromising one party or the other, because ultimately, for all we know, the bidder could choose to take over the site themselves, and if they do, that would have an effect on the tenants who are there. So for me, it's a difference between, it really is as simple as, can we make a better decision, but at the same time keep the governance, respect the fact we've had a bidder, respect the fact that we also have a long established community temple that we should have a moral duty to help support, even if no more than that, even if it's not a legal duty. There is a moral duty for someone who's been very well established in this city. I think we could do all those things, and I think we could do all those things well, which is why I think, you know, it might not be in the black and white of the legality of what we're here to do, but I think there is a difference between right and wrong, and we can be right, and we can also satisfy every party in doing so to the best of our ability, which is why I think I endorse Councillor Allen's recommendation.
Can I just clarify, you seconding that recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. I would be happy to.
Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Can I come back on that?
Yeah, Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you. I'm here to support the community. They're a valuable asset. They've played a very significant role in the community, and I respect that. And I also consider that if I was in their position, how would I feel from a layman's perspective? However, we have a sort of a legal duty where we've got some parameters that we have to follow, and my hands are a bit tight. So my response to you is that, yes, I would want the council or the cabinet or the administration to give a sort of undertaking that they will provide the relevant alternative accommodation that would suit their purposes. But my real question to you is, to the members, is that the information that is lacking is clarification. Would the decision be different? Right? That's the whole purpose. I mean, we'll be sitting here discussing that. There'll be another call out. We'll be back sitting again and discussing the matter. The real question that I would like to answer to is that if we receive that clarification, would the decision be different or would it remain the same? That's the question that I would like an answer to. Then I'll probably be minded to change my mind.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I don't think that is the relevant question because we are not the Cabinet. The question is, have Cabinet had all the information they need to make the right decision? And I think what our discussions have led us to is a feeling that Section 123 consideration is not just about money. It's about value, and that includes social value, community value, and we have not been given clear information as to why the weighting system that has been applied in this case, the 70-20-10 weighting system, was chosen, or indeed a breakdown of how it was applied. And I think that we are looking for reassurance that Cabinet have had that information and that they have that information when making their decision. We need to be mindful that we are here to serve our residents, not just make business decisions. I don't feel that Cabinet had all the information behind the choice of weightings or the methodology that was used, and we need to ensure that they do.
Thank you for that. Just quickly for me to go back, you were saying it's just clarity. I personally don't think it's just clarity that we're asking for. I think we're asking for more than that, and I think Councillor Hillier summed that up well. So thank you. Parish Councillor Barbanks, please.
Very similar. Basically what I was going to say. I suppose regarding the sending it back to Cabinet, we need to identify a reason. I suppose one of the arguments could be that the decision has been illogical because they haven't had all the information, just for your consideration. So yeah, that would be a suggestion.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to get some clarification before I went forward. Has anyone else got any points they would like to raise in that debate, or do we think that the debate has come to a conclusion? Okay. As Councillor Bowerbanks has said, in order to make a recommendation, we also need to outline where we think the Cabinet has gone wrong, or what we think wasn't right about the process, in order to make those recommendations. And I think it's been highlighted by a few people that have spoken within the debate what our concerns are. And I think, you know, do we think they've had all of the information that is necessary and required in order to come to any conclusion? And I'm not suggesting they need to change their conclusion, but I do think there is material things that have been missed and need to be given to Cabinet in order for them to conclude their decision. And so I think you've heard a recommendation put forward, and that went along the lines of it going back to Cabinet. I'm just going to ask Matt now if he will read out the recommendation, and then obviously we need to have a vote on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So the recommendation we have here, proposed by Councillor Allen and seconded by Councillor Howard, is that the decision be referred back to Cabinet for it to review the process and decision, as the committee considers it did not have the full material information to make the decision, and that Cabinet determines there will be no disposal until the existing tenants have either found new premises or retained their existing tenancies within a timescale of 6 months. And 2, that Cabinet should have sight of the methodology used to select the weighting and the information used to conclude the equalities impact assessment.
Sorry, I'll just pass you over to Graham.
Sorry, I just want to ask members to just make clear that there's 2 parts to that recommendation. Part 1 speaks about material information that needs to go to Cabinet. I just want to make sure that Part 2 is outlining what that information is, because we need to be specific about what material information is thought by members of Scrutiny to have been lacking from Cabinet. So that recommendation, those recommendations, you're happy to pass, but just to confirm to members, there's nothing other than those documents and information stated in Part 2 of your recommendation that you're suggesting needs to go back to Cabinet, and if there is, we need to clarify that and specify it in the recommendation.
Just to come back, I think, as was stated, our additional information around the weighting that was used, which was referred to as the 70-20-10, we would like confirmation as to the reasonings behind that. As was mentioned by Councillor Antunes, there is alternative weightings that can be used, so we think it needs to be very clear why we have come to those weightings. Also, further information in relation to the scores that were given, that were applied to those weightings, I think also needs to go there. And as was touched on by what Councillor Hillier said, was the equality impact assessment. At the moment, we just have a conclusion. We don't have any of the substantive information that was done that came about to that conclusion. So can you confirm that that's sufficient?
So we have the methodology for the weighting, details behind the scoring, and the full equality impact assessment.
If anyone thinks I've missed anything or something was missed by Matt, please stay now. I take that as agreed. Thank you. So now we must go to a vote. All those in favour, can you put your hand up? All those against? Any abstentions? So that passes. we can now conclude the meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for everyone's participation. Thank you.